Okay.
Christina, we're good to go.
You are now live.
Okay, thank you very much and welcome to the October 5th Planning Commission meeting. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7:01. Prior to roll call, the city attorney would like to make an announcement to the Planning Commission regarding the teleconferencing of this meeting. So we turn this over to our able Assistant City Attorney, Ms. Alicia Poon.
Thank you, Chair Kuznick. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. The executive orders authorize this planning commission to hold public meetings by teleconference during the COVID-19 crisis. I previously went over the specific provisions of the Brown Act that have been temporarily amended or suspended in order to allow for this meeting to take place by teleconference, and this meeting will comply with all such provisions. Madam Recording Secretary, it would now be appropriate for you to conduct roll call, after which I would ask the chair to recognize me in order to confirm certain matters for the record. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. All right, we have Commissioner Edwards.
Here.
Commissioner Marks.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Alpert.
Here.
And Chair Kuznick.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Poon. You may now proceed with confirming matters for the record.
Thank you again, Chair Kuznick. I would now like to ask the chair, the vice chair, and the other commission members 3 questions. And rather than ask you to respond separately to these questions, I'll ask all 3. And if the answer is yes to all 3, please say yes and physically raise your hand. Question number 1, can you hear me well? Question number 2, have you been able to hear all previous speakers, including the roll call, clearly? And question 3, are you satisfied based on facial or voice recognition or otherwise that everyone here representing themselves to be a commission member is actually the person they are representing themselves to be? I'm looking for yeses and raised hands, please.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Seeing all hands raised, the record should reflect that I have received affirmative answers from each commission member present to all 3 questions. That all commission members have indicated they are able to hear each other and these proceedings clearly. And no commission member has expressed doubt that each and every commission member participating by teleconference is in fact the commission member they are representing themselves to be. And finally, I would now like to advise the chair and the commission members and the recording secretary that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting must be taken by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we turn to our recording secretary who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Turn to item number 4, public comments or written communications. This is, so we're going to ask Jen if we have any, if you would like to provide the directions on how to request time to speak during public comment.
Sure. You may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak when public comment is being taken. And at this time, members of the public can address the Planning Commission on any item not included in tonight's agenda. We don't have any written communication, so I'm just going to take a peek over here and see if we have any hands that have been raised for public comment. All right, I don't see any hands.
Okay, very good. So at this point, while we don't have anything, we have opened it. And we are going to subsequently close public comment on items not on the agenda at this moment. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to our next item. Okay. Item 5, additions and revisions. There are no items. Item 6, consent calendar. There are no items. Item 7, approval of the minutes. We have our minutes of the September 21st regular Planning Commission meeting. Is there Comments or corrections?
Couple hands.
Okay, yes. Okay, Commissioner Edwards, please.
So I just noted, I think that item number 10.1, we may want to amend that. It says Billy Ferreira voiced concerns with the application and lack of goodwill and discussion regarding the acquisition of the property. I tend to think we may want to correct that regarding the acquisition of the property that is not included within the project area. That's just a proposal that I'd like to make. And then there was go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not clear. Are you suggesting we should, this is on Mr. Ferrara's comments?
Correct.
And what you would do is strike out everything after the word application?
No, I suggest that we clarify acquisition of the property to mean property that's not included within the project area.
You're
Okay.
suggesting an adjustment in the minutes. Okay, so regarding the acquisition of the property outside the project property.
Correct.
Sufficient, okay. Okay,
Yes.
all right. Is there an additional item, Commissioner Edwards? Okay, no, very good. Okay, Commissioner Marks, you have a hand up.
I do. In item 10.2,
Okay.
the last paragraph, the second to the last sentence, about midway, there's the word and they supported the removal of unbuildable lands in the creek setback area from the net density calculation. Right after that, I'd like to add, and supported a traditional architectural style for the project. We all took a sort of a consensus vote and agreed that we were more traditional in our thinking than shown in the plans.
Okay. All right, so we have two amendments to the minutes. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as amended? Okay.
I will move to adopt the minutes of September 21st, 2021 as amended tonight by Commissioners Edwards and Marks.
Okay, very good. We have a motion.
I will second that.
We have a second. Okay, Madam Secretary.
All right, we'll do a quick roll call vote. We had mover, Vice Chair Alpert.
Aye.
Thank you. Seconder, Commissioner Edwards.
Aye.
Commissioner Marks.
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
And Chair Kuznick.
Aye.
All right, item 7.1, minutes from the September 21st meeting pass as amended.
Okay, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Commissioners. Yes. Item number 8, continued items after the closing. There are none. And now we move to item number 9, the continued public hearing of the City Village Development Proposal, hearing number 5. We're going to open this public hearing, and we have a presentation from our senior planner, Ms. Yee.
Thank you and good evening, planning commissioners and members of the public. Tonight we are here holding our 5th public hearing on the specific plan amendment to the North Camino Ramon specific plan, as well as considering the addendum to that North Camino Ramon specific plan EAR. I don't have a PowerPoint tonight, so I'll spare you yet another presentation, but I wanted just to summarize that since September 21st, the Commission had made recommendations for changes to the specific plan and the addendum. Those changes have been incorporated into the matrix in Exhibit A of Attachment A, and a summary of the changes that were made have been included into your staff report. Additionally, we'd like to note that there is a new exhibit, Exhibit D, that's attached to the draft resolution, which identifies the amendments that are proposed to the figures of the North Camino Road specific plan. And so this evening, we would recommend the commission continue the public hearing, review the proposed changes, take public comment, and then close that public hearing, and then consider draft resolution 06-21, which has been attached, recommending approval of the specific plan and the addendum to the City Council. And so the Planning Commission's action on the development applications would follow at a subsequent meeting that's scheduled and was continued at our last meeting to October 19th on the development applications, should the commission tonight recommend the adoption of the specific plan. So with that, that concludes my report this evening. I know the applicant is also in the audience this evening. I know they don't have a presentation prepared, but I believe they do want to say a few words just to address the commission.
I went ahead and I promoted Denise. I'll also promote Jerry. Anyone else you'd like me to bring in?
Yeah, if you could bring in Kevin as well. I think that rounds out probably the team that wanted to be on the panel.
There he is. I see him. Okay. We should have everyone.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Denise Cunningham with Summerhill Homes.
All right. Thank you, Cindy. Good evening, Chair Kuznick and Planning Commissioners. It's good to see you again tonight. I'm Denise Cunningham, Vice President of Development with Summerhill Homes. And we have our whole team here again tonight, including Robert Freed, Summerhill CEO, and Kevin Ibrahimi, the Senior Vice President of Development for Summerhill. Jerry Engen with Sunset Development is also available, and we are available to answer any questions that you have tonight. We would like to thank you and thank staff for your time and your efforts in reviewing the proposed revisions to the North Camino Ramon specific plan. And Summerhill fully supports these proposed changes. Also, we look forward to coming back to the Planning Commission on October 19th, and we will be prepared to address the project level questions that were raised on the 7th. Again, we appreciate your support for the City Village project, and thank you, and we'll be available for questions.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else from the applicant before we go on? No, okay. Commissioners, questions to applicant or to city staff on this before we open public comment? Okay, no? Well, I have a question then. Could I would like to say, I would like to apologize that when this specific topic came up at the last meeting, I had to excuse myself for coughing. Could you just briefly walk us through the part where you say that there is an easement issue and that the double row of trees is not going to be part of the Camino Ramon green belt or linear park, as it's being called? And then after that, Commissioner Marks, it'll be your turn. Thank you.
Sure, I can address that.
Thank you.
I don't believe that, at least on September 21st, we got too deep into the trees and the landscape, streetscapes for the public streets on Norris and Camino Ramon. I think that was something that we had deferred to when we got to the development application stage. But just to give you a preview of that, there will be some additional exhibits that we're working on for October 19th so that you can see how those streetscapes will look like. There are some conflicts with utilities that currently exist along the roadway. There will still be some opportunities for trees on the along the curb on Camino Ramon. But there are some limitations specifically on Norris Canyon that would prevent that what was originally depicted as the double row of trees. But just keep in mind that although that has changed, those plans are being finalized right now, and we'll have those available on October 19th.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions for the city attorney. The first is, if the Planning Commission approves the resolution attached to tonight's staff report, does that approval in any way trigger any of the provisions of SB 330? In other words, assuming the commission chooses to do so, is it still in a legal position to amend the actual 404 unit project site plan if that's what the commission chooses to do? I want to avoid sort of getting trapped by, if we are triggering any SB 330 provisions by adopting the plan amendments, I'd like to know that in advance.
No, there's no SB 330 application. This is just about the specific plan amendment and processing that.
Okay, I just want to be clear because I am not sure I fully understand all of the impacts of SB 330. So I thank you for that. The second is, I pointed out at the last meeting that I was uncomfortable that we had really held at that point 2 Measure G meetings. I felt that because last meeting was the first time that we had gotten any detailed information about the amendments, any staff analysis, any analysis about consistency with the general plan, that really constituted meeting number 1 under Measure G. And if that were the case, tonight would be meeting number 2 rather than meeting number 3. And so I'm interested from your standpoint, from a legal standpoint, if we adopt the resolution tonight, have we met all of our obligations under Measure G, with particular emphasis on having held 3 meetings on under Measure G on the plan, rather than, in my view, only 2?
Yes, you have met the minimum 3. There's been 5, as stated in the staff report. So it started with a joint meeting with the council and then went on with your hearings.
And again, the reason I said that was, again, last meeting was the only time we had ever gotten any kind of detailed discussion or information. But if you're comfortable that we're meeting Measure G, that's fine, and my concern is answered. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Marks. Fellow commissioners, questions, discussion before we move on? Okay, no more questions for the applicants at this point. All right, very good. So we will then move on into opening public comment on this topic. So we are going to check, and we're going to hear the description for giving public comment.
Yes, absolutely. So just a reminder, if you'd like to speak on item 9.1, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone. So at this time, we'll take members of the audience. I'm just going to look over here and see what we have going. Okay, and it looks like so far we have 1 hand raised. We'll go ahead and allow you to speak. Jim Blickenstaff. You should be allowed to speak whenever you're ready.
Well, hello, Commissioners. Jim Blickenstaff. I just wanted to follow up very briefly on the last meeting to clarify one term. I mentioned that you set a precedent by the number of acres you put aside for a project of 1,200 and some people. And the precedent is a legal term, and it doesn't really relate to stipulations within ordinances or the general plan or zoning. So, for example, if there's another project that would have multiples of 1,200, say 3,600, and they had asked for just 6 acres of parks and you wanted them to do more, that would bring up a legal question of preference for one developer over another. And so the precedent is set by interpretation of your general plan, et cetera, of a lower amount that is then entitled. And it sets a standard by that legal precedent that will have a ripple effect on future projects and multiply the deficiency in parks. So that's what I was trying to get across by the fact that it's not just one and done with one particular project. It can go on as a standard and even allow for litigation by the developer if he's thinking he's being treated unfairly. So that's a serious issue that goes beyond a single project that I think the commissioners need to understand that and be careful about park dedication, because with smaller yards and smaller properties, you're going to need more green space in parks, not less. So it's an ongoing issue that's going to be exacerbated by the downsizing of housing as we go forward. So you're going to need parks more than ever. And that's the direction we should be going with that quality of life issue. The other question that came up, I think it can get a very quick and simple answer, is when you do a specific plan amendment for this, have you constrained the Planning Commission in any sense about their discretion and what they can do on this issue of parks? Right now, it's 2 acres of set aside acreage for that. And does a specific plan amendment constrain that kind of discretion to where if they wanted to do something more in parks, they'd be allowed to do it at the next meeting? So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Okay. And I don't see any other hands raised. We'll give it just a moment if anyone decides to that they'd like to speak. Okay, and I see no further speakers.
And I concur. And so at this time, I would like to close the public hearing on this topic.
Through the chair, the applicant has the right for rebuttal testimony to those speakers who did speak tonight.
Okay, very good. So applicants, would you like to exercise your right for rebuttal?
No, I don't believe we've had any comment. Just a brief segue to address your question on the trees. We are working on that. We're working very hard with our team to get that 2 rows of trees back into the plan, even with the constraints of the utilities. So we'll have something for you on the 19th. I don't, beyond that on the park, I think that's probably a question for the city in the specific plan amendment. But I will say that the park as shown in the specific plan currently is 2 acres. So the acreage would not be changing.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I believe at this point, it's our opportunity as commissioners to give our thoughts on this particular topic and where we are in terms of what should we do going forward. So who would like to go first? I see no hands. Commissioner Wallace, you're always good for in the terms of baseball, a leadoff hitter.
Okey dokey. I feel we've had more than 5 hearings on this plan already. I spent a fair amount of time, like I did the last time, going over the development, the resolution, plus the changes to the specific plan to make sure that they corresponded to the comments we made at our last meeting. And I'm fairly satisfied that they do. I did make a couple of comments to staff this morning about labeling some of the graphs to make it accurate in the general plan, but you're just talking about changing the number, not the substance of the plan. So I think that in terms of what we've been asked to review, I think that we have done a pretty good job of accomplishing the amendment to the plan, certainly consistent with the meeting we had with the city council. Obviously, there's an application going forward that we will deal with, but I think that for the purpose of the North Camino Ramon specific plan, this particular change makes sense. We've tried to make it consistent. And I, for one, am willing to approve the amendments as written.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could, I'd like to turn our attention to packet page 38.
If you give us
This is a comment that I made last meeting, but didn't get picked up in the revisions. There are a number of bullet points in the first column on that page. Turning to the last bullet point regarding roofs, if you go down to the second sentence, there's the word sky and then a period. After the word sky and before the period, I'd like to have inserted and shall be constructed with dimensional roofing materials. That was a point that I made last time and the commission accepted. And then I have one more item, and that's on packet page 40, if you're ready to go there. And this is a sort of a mea culpa on my part. Policy VIS-1.4 at the very bottom of the third column begins with the word encourage. And that's what was there last time, and I didn't pick up on that. I was trying to get to require development in the plan area to implement the walking district master plan goals, policies, and design guidelines. In other words, to give it the same directive authority that any other part of a specific plan might have. Encourage is an optional situation, and I'm not looking for it to be optional. If we want to have the walking district be internally consistent and get built out the way the master plan, I think, anticipates, I think it should be a requirement. And so I would ask the Planning Commission to please make those changes. Other than that, I'm sorry. Other than that, like Commissioner Wallace, I'm prepared tonight to vote in the affirmative on the plan amendments.
Thank you so much. Ms. Chamberlain, you have your hand up.
My only caution, and I appreciate Commissioner Mark's comment because the walking district is of utter importance to our city council. The plan is yet to be adopted. And so it's very difficult to require something that is still in the design phase to be retroactive to a plan area.
But so, Debbie, we inserted a placeholder saying that the plan was going to be inserted at a later date, and it can be adopted at that point. It won't be tonight, obviously, but at a later date, we can do that. And again, for the long-term impact of that walking district, if it is an encouragement rather than a requirement, someone can disagree and be in a key part of the district, and it would have a detrimental impact on the district. So while I respect what Debbie's trying to say here, I really think all we did is insert a placeholder saying we were going to amend the plan at a later date, and at a later date, we can add that language.
Well, I mean, before you start is a project where it will be the 19th, where the plan will not be in place. So that's my caution to the commission. So the applicant has worked to design and work with the walking district group to ensure that their plan conforms to that. We want to make sure that going forward, that we will encourage folks to proceed with it, but at times there may be conflicts or other things that may not be able to fully implement the district itself, but we will strive to do as best we can, because as we've talked about, going north from Norris Canyon Road, there are utility conflicts that potentially will limit how much can be done, that substantial condemnation or taking a property to ensure the district can be fulfilled. So
when we adopt the plan, we can build language into the plan that allows for flexibility like that. I see what you're saying, Debbie, and I know where you feel we need to go. I just have a different point of view that encouraging is not the same as requiring, and it doesn't lead to the same outcomes. But I'll leave it up to the commission.
Okay, Mr. Barr.
Thank you. I have to agree with Debbie on a couple of points. It's very difficult to potentially mandate development to pursue a set of standards that are yet to be approved. There's no direct correlation to what's involved in those standards. It's essentially a blank check. And again, there's questions within the walking district related to feasibility that may be beyond the control of a developer to be able to implement. And so I think it's one thing to require, assessment and, to address the ability to implement, improvements that are consistent with a walking district plan in the future. But to straight up mandate them, I think is problematic, especially since those standards don't exist as of now. And so I don't know if it's defendable, and it might be a legal question for the attorneys.
I have to say that, again, I'm not looking that the Summerhill project is going to be subject to this because the plan won't be in place. The specific plan will not have been amended to incorporate the walking district at the point that they are going to complete their process. For every other project, it is no different than any of the other standards that we have, where if they cannot meet it because of something beyond their control, of course, there are ways that you would try to accommodate them. But that is the norm in any kind of a plan. So yes, future people, and again, not Summerhill, but future development projects would be and should be subject to the design standards. That's no different than any other standard that we're going to have.
Well, I think the policy statement doesn't exactly say what you just did. I think if you're going to pursue an action about incorporating the standards into the specific plan, the policy should reflect that rather than tying it to future development projects. The policy should read, once adopted, incorporate the provisions of the walking district as appropriate into the specific plan. Again, it's who's doing the action is really the question. And again, if it's the intent of the commission to, essentially adopt the walking district standards as development standards for future development, that's a different process than just mandating them at this point. And again, I'm just questioning whether we're getting too far in front of something that we don't have a clear understanding of.
Let me weigh in. I wouldn't recommend applying standards that are not set yet, because I don't think that you need something more definite. So it's clear on those who are developing, because it could be a bar to their development if if it's too broad or just unclear as to how it's to be applied. And if it's something that's not set yet and they're wanting to build sooner than when it's actually completed, then it could be problematic for someone who has an approved project.
Well, as we've said as we've said in the past, standards are different than policies. The word standards is not included in anything that is in this statement. It says goals, policies, and guidelines. Standards are different than a design guideline. Design guidelines are guides. Policies are not the same as the standard. And we have made that decision several times in the past. So I guess I don't understand staff's reluctance. But once again, I don't want to make a bigger thing of this than it might be. I'll go where the Planning Commission wants to go.
Through the chair, it might be more appropriate once the walking district is adopted. We recognize that the plan area, we're working through our housing element update right now, that there may be an amendment to the plan area done. I would suggest that when we undertake an amendment to the North Community Plan in relation to the housing update that we're under right now, that maybe we revisit this issue at that point in time.
Commissioner Albert.
So I'm not sure I followed totally the subtlety of what we're saying, but I believe, in my opinion, once the plan is adopted, the expectation is applicants will not just be encouraged to comply with the plan, but will be expected to comply with the plan. And I would like to see language that states that, whether it's a item that says we will update the plan once the walking district plan is adopted, or by default that future developments will be compliant with the adopted walking district plan. And I appreciate that we don't have that yet, and we don't know when we will, but at that point when it is adopted, I think my opinion is the expectation is that future development should comply. And I think that I think takes care of the application we have in front of us, because there is no adopted plan today, and there won't be, anytime in the near future. So that's my opinion about a possible way to get past this.
So are Commissioner Wallace and Commissioner Edwards, thoughts on this?
I'll let Commissioner Edwards go first.
So I don't necessarily have thoughts about this aspect of it. I tend to agree with Ms. Chamberlain. I do have some other comments though, but I'm going to defer to Mr. Wallace.
Okay, I had a couple of questions, because we're, the chicken versus the egg here. First of all, how does the walking district master plan get adopted by the city? Is that through an ordinance?
No, it'll be through resolution by the city council.
Okay. And what force and effect does that resolution have? Is that binding on anybody or what?
Is guidelines for development of future properties that are in the boundaries of the walking district, and recognize that the majority of the walking district is City Walk and BR6. And so both projects have worked, our stakeholders in the process, and have worked to design pathways and connections and activity nodes that support the walking district policies. They basically are designing the walking district. Outside of City Walk and BR6, you have south of Bowling Canyon Road, which takes you through Sports Basement in the Marketplace, and then north of Norris Canyon, which takes you to Crow Canyon Commons. And as we all acknowledge, Crow Canyon Commons, that connection to Crow Canyon Road is very constrained based on existing development and utilities. Going on Norris Canyon Road West, there are some opportunities that will present themselves if Toyota property ever develops. And so at the time that property would develop, the walking district hopefully will be an approved plan that we would work to encourage them to comply with those standards. But going back to my original comments, is at this point in time, you have a project that has worked to meet the spirit and intent of a plan that is yet to be adopted. We have future projects that will come before the city. And so as we work to amend this plan overall in the future, we can certainly work into that plan the requirements for the walking district. As Ms. Poon indicated, the plan is yet to be adopted. We don't have those standards yet. And so it's not fair to add it to a plan area until all property owners have had the chance to participate in the proceedings to hear that plan and work through its implementation that may affect their property.
Okay, so hypothetically, the city passes the walking district master plan. Can the city initiate a amendment to the North Camino Ramon specific plan that deals with the impact of the walking district master plan on North Camino Ramon and draw up guidelines, rules, whatever you want to call them, to implement the master plan at that time?
We could, and so it's all going to come about. So as I mentioned, we are in this housing element update process right now. And so that is our major action plan right now. And out of that will come tasks that will have to be accomplished as part of that update. And so one of those I am anticipating as we look for housing sites, that will be an update to this plan area to address our housing needs. And then could look towards the walking district implementation.
Yeah, we're going to update a large portion, if not the whole thing, of the North Camino Ramon specific plan as part of the general plan / housing element update. That's going to take us into 2023, or at least the end of 2022.
Well, according to the state, it'll be late 2022. So yes.
Okay, so maybe this is an unfair question to ask, but that's okay anyway. Does somebody have an idea, a realistic idea of when the walking district master plan might be adopted?
So right now we're continuing to work with the stakeholders. We've had a stakeholders meeting and have received their input. And so we're making change to the plan. We're hoping that plan will be released for a public review draft probably late November, early December at this point in time. So I anticipate adoption probably early next year of it.
Early next year, did you say that?
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds to me like the walking district master plan is going to be adopted by the city prior to when we have to pull the trigger on the final amendments to the North Camino Ramon specific plan. If that is an accurate statement, then my suggestion would be to leave the language as is and put a mental asterisk on this particular policy, and so we can revisit it when the walking master plan is done in black and white.
So sorry, through the chair, just to be clear. So before you tonight is an amendment to BR6. That's all that you're discussing. The walking district is this other element that is being processed on the side. That's extremely important to the city, and BR6 is adhering to or helping implement the walking district. And so the North Camino Plan amendment we're dealing with tonight is separate from a larger amendment that we may undertake in the future.
Okay, let me cut it short here. What I'm really trying to get at is leave policy BIS-1.4 as written.
That's your recommendation. Or Debbie, did you want to comment on that? No? Okay. Commissioners?
How do you say I agree with Mr. Wallace? Come on.
Well, it's we keep going back and forth. I mean, we felt very strongly at the last meeting that it was time to put language into part of the North Camino Ramon specific plan. We are amending the North Camino Ramon specific plan. It seems appropriate that because we are undertaking 23 other amendments, that we added the 24th. Now, that's my recollection. Do other people recall this differently from the last meeting? I was slightly, a little cold, but thought I remembered it correctly. Commissioner Wallace?
Yeah, let me make it clear. Maybe
Okay.
I wasn't clear with the comment I made. I agree with staff's proposal to amend the plan to add that particular policy and use the term encourage development as opposed to mandate development, because the master plan hasn't been developed yet, with the idea that sometime next year, we're going to be revising North Camino Ramon anyway as part of the housing element. And at that time, we can address whatever issues arise from the walking district master plan.
Other commissioners' thoughts? Okay, Commissioner Edwards. Oh, you're on mute, hon.
Apologies. I would agree with Commissioner Wallace about leaving the language as is.
Okay. So we seem, okay. If I have read the room on this one, Commissioner Alpert, you were leaning towards saying that you wished future developments to be compliant with the walking district plans. Commissioner Marks, you would like to include the word require as opposed to encourage. And then Commissioner Wallace and Commissioner Edwards, you're happy with the language as it is. Am I reading this correct?
Yeah, just a minor correction.
Okay.
I want them to be compliant with the plan once adopted, not
Okay.
what
Okay.
not the way not the concept before it's adopted. You know,
Okay.
I think once the plan is adopted, and if the mechanics of that are that the city will initiate a specific plan amendment once adopted as part of the housing element, then I'm okay, you know, with it taking that path, you know. But I do want future developments, future projects that come forward after the plan's adopted to be required to be compliant, not encourage them to be compliant, but
Okay.
to be compliant. You know.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Lauren?
Again, I think we need some clarification in that the walking district guidelines as they're being proposed are just that, they're guidelines. They are not ordinances, and they are not intended to be development standards. It's a vision that is being pursued that works within the North Communal Ramon Plan area, Bishop Ranch, as well as other areas. Now, if it's the desire of the commission to amend the specific plan to adopt standards within the specific plan that are consistent with the ordinance requirements, or to essentially to create ordinance requirements that match the design guidelines in the walking district, they can do that. But the document that's being created does not have the force of an ordinance. It is a resolution, it's design guidelines. And so again, you run into this issue of trying to mandate something that's an advisory document or a vision document that was never intended to be an ordinance. And again, you can create those standards around specific areas, but it's problematic to just say, we're going to require everything in there, because there's a lot of opportunities and variations in conditions that exist within the plan area. And it's intended to be flexible to address those concerns as we move forward. But the real intent, again, is that we have a unified vision for this walking district area, so that as the opportunities present themselves, we can take advantage of them and put them into projects and create that. Or on the other hand, if the city is doing right-of-way improvements, we can fund those things ourselves and make the improvements necessary. But again, it's not a set of development standards as it would be in a specific plan.
Okay, Commissioner Marks?
Madam Chair, I was going to say that I would support what Commissioner Alpert said about when the plan is adopted, that at least some portions of it that are intended to be or that are likely to be more important than others might become a standard. Somebody may adopt the plan right now, but a year or so from now, or whenever that comes back to the Planning Commission for incorporation into the North Camino Ramon specific plan, it doesn't necessarily have to be just guidelines. It can be more than that. It can be amended in public session to include whatever standards at that time people want and whatever guidelines people want to be more flexible about. So to say that it's just guidelines and that's what it would always be is simply not correct. At the point that the North Camino Ramon specific plan is amended, the walking district can be amended from whatever it is at the time of its initial adoption to whatever the Planning Commission and Council want it to be at that time. But whatever comes out of that adoption process that incorporates the walking district into the North Camino Ramon specific plan. I would like it to be a requirement that at least some portions of it, to be determined when we've all had a chance to see what the plan says, are mandatory, and other aspects can be simply guidelines. So in short, I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to accept whatever the commission adopts tonight, with the idea that that's not necessarily the final document.
Okay. Lauren?
Just to be clear, I'm actually not disagreeing with what Mr. Marks is saying. What I am agreeing with is that it requires a separate set of actions in the context of the specific plan in order to adopt any portion of the design guidelines by ordinance as enforceable within the specific plan area. It's just that it's premature to do that as part of this action, or even imply that. It requires just a different process that would be done in a different setting, and it would be something that the Planning Commission and the City Council will ultimately have discretion over, separate from this idea of simply wanting to make sure that people consider the document. I think that's a fine way of looking at it, but it comes down to a future effort to incorporate those standards as being mandatory in whatever capacity both the Planning Commission and City Council feel is appropriate.
I don't know how we did it, but I agree with Lauren.
Okay, so Lauren, help me out here then. Back to the vision statement, the amendment. I mean, are we suggesting that there's some rewording here?
I mean, again, if this is adequate as a stopgap measure, you could include some language that talks about future consideration.
Okay.
If
So
that could help, it doesn't have to be necessarily policy language. It could be clarifying language to get to the intent of what you're trying to accomplish. But it cannot be specific in terms of what is adopted. It just has to be consideration of standards associated with it.
Can I make a suggestion? That
Yes.
you make the policy somewhat along these lines that has this concept: to consider amendments to the North Camino Ramon specific plan to implement walking district master plan goals, policies, and design guidelines when the master plan is adopted. So what you're requiring is consideration. You're not requiring us to do anything, but to consider it.
I would just clarify following adoption as opposed to when.
Okay.
When implies concurrence or immediate.
Well, we definitely don't want concurrent.
Eric, can you give that one more time?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
I'm going to try and do this top of my head. The
I know.
policy would be to consider amendments to the North Camino Ramon specific plan to implement the walking district master plan goals, policies, and design guidelines when the master plan is adopted.
Okay. Does that speak to those of you who wanted a little stronger in your language? Rick?
Well, it's fine for now. Again, it all depends on what happens in the future when the matter comes up to be incorporated into the North Camino Ramon plan.
Okay.
So I'll accept it for tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Alpert, how do you feel about that? Yes? Okay, nodding your head. Okay. And I believe Commissioner Edwards, you were okay with keeping it less specific. Okay. All right. I think we have reached a feel for that last statement. So to staff, you will make that adjustment.
Yes.
Should we vote on this?
If it's voted on, we will make that adjustment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Yes, Commissioner Edwards, thank you for your patience. And I know you had other items.
Yeah. So I wanted to discuss with the commissioners something that I'm struggling with a little bit with this project. I really, really like the optics of this project. I think the design of the homes is thoughtful. What I am struggling with is the density on this site. And I'm struggling with the reduction of the minimum density on this site from 20 units per acre to 14 units per acre. We don't get a second chance with this land. And I'm concerned that reducing the density in this area of the specific plan is at odds with the vision for the specific plan. And I'm really struggling. I'm really struggling with this. So I think that I'd like to perhaps have a discussion with my fellow commissioners about the density on this site, so that we can better understand, I think, and maybe reach a consensus about the density issue.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, Lauren, would you like to comment on this particular or offer some insight?
Well, I would just touch on the question of unit count and density. The specific plan actually has a specific unit allocation associated with it that can be met through a number of sites throughout the plan area, including this one. And so the density range will dictate the type of development that occurs, but it's still governed by the maximum unit count that exists within the plan area as a whole. And so again, there are going to be opportunities at various densities depending on site conditions and project proposals. So I would just offer that up as part of the discussion for the commission.
Thank
so
you.
If I can just respond to that. When we're talking about the unit count in a specific plan, we're talking about a maximum number of units. I think we've got a situation where we've got the maximum number of units could be 1,500. What I'm concerned about is this project delivers a lot less density than is permitted on this particular site. And now we've established a willingness to reduce the density in the specific plan area. And we have pressures from the state to plan for and support development of affordable units, of units in general. And my concern is that we go from, just because we make piecemeal specific plan changes to individual sites within the plan area, we wind up with a plan area that we've planned for 1,500 units, but perhaps we only wind up with 750 units because we make site-specific decisions to reduce the density. And I'm concerned about that.
Thank you. Other commissioners?
Through the chair, if I may add, so the North Cunningham plan has the maximum capacity of 1,124 units, which at the time meets the housed element unit count for the plan area that we are currently under. With the approval of the Park Central, which is about 118 units, Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, and then the potential approval of 404 units, the plan area has achieved 522 units. So that's nearly half of the units that have been programmed for the plan area on 2 sites. So, we have through 2 applications potentially have met nearly half of the anticipated housing growth in the plan area.
Thank you. Ms. Jean?
Yes, thank you. I'd also like to add the reason we've established a 14 dwelling unit per acre minimum on this site. Keep in mind that the general plan land use designation for this property already does establish the range of 14 to 30 dwelling units. And so it's a little difficult to follow, but at the end of the day, even though this application hasn't filed a SB 330 application, there is the ability, if based on just the way that the general plan is already identified as a 14 dwelling unit per acre minimum density, that technically speaking, an application could be filed on the site with that minimum of 14. And so I understand that the current range is 20 to 40, but under the way that new state law has established itself, and because it is in place, cities have to consider the fact that whichever rules that are in place that provide the most allowance of the applicant to pursue a residential project, whether that's 14 dwelling units per acre based on the general plan allowance, or the specific plan that allows for 20 to 40 dwelling units per acre currently in that BRMU, they could pursue that as their minimum density. And so even though this application does not include a SB 330 application, just wanted to keep in mind that there is a general plan designation that already contemplated and gives the ability for the applicant to pursue a range as low as 14.
Thank you.
I have to say that I think that this is the first I've heard of that nuance, because part of the amendment is to change the minimum down to from 20 to 14. So could you just give me one more pass at where is it not in the specific plan, this 14, or is it just in the general plan? Because this is, I don't believe it came up in all the other reading of all these documents.
Yeah. So before SB 330 was in place, and I'll probably need to make sure Alicia is on board with the context of this, but before SB 330 was adopted in last year,
mm-hmm.
The way that the city approached our specific plan approvals was that the specific plan would be the guiding document for development of a plan area.
Okay.
We have a general plan, mixed use land use designation, basically for just like Croquet specific plan, the entirety of what used to be Croquet and a large portion of the core of the city has a mixed use density range of 14 to 30 dwelling units per acre on the general plan. And the specific plan was expected to then provide further guidance through a specific plan document to determine how those properties would be further developed using the specific plan as the guiding document. That concept essentially has been flipped over on its head with some of the new state laws that have come out, where it gives opportunities for applicants of a residential project maximum flexibility of whatever guiding documents are currently established as of when the plan or when the state law went into effect. And so because state law currently, the city currently identifies a general plan land use designation of mixed use at 14 to 30 dwelling units per acre, but the specific plan has a 20 to 40 unit range. There's two separate and potentially competing ranges, but there is the ability for the applicant to use basically the low end of that range at 14 all the way up to the high end at 40 that the specific plan designates.
All right, thank you. Okay.
I had a question from Ms. Yee. The current zoning designation in the specific plan for BR6 is Bishop Ranch office, I believe. Is there a density range for residential if someone wanted to put it on that spot?
For BRMU?
Yes, for the current designation, Bishop Ranch Mixed use, is that the current one?
So BRMU is land use designation. Multifamily residential is the range that is established for the multifamily, which is the 20 to 40 dwelling units per acre. So BRMU in the definition allows for a mix of residential and commercial. And then we look at the multifamily standards that we would apply where we find the 20 to 40 dwelling units per acre range.
Thank you.
Other commissioners?
Go
Go ahead, Commissioner Wallace. I'm
Say
sorry.
something, you know.
Go ahead.
I completely understand the issue we're going to face about residential housing in the city, and particularly in the Bishop Ranch area and North Camino Road specific plan. When we originally did the plan, we wanted to put 1,500 units in that area, and the city council cut us back to 1,144. As Ms. Chamberlain pointed out, we're almost halfway to that, assuming that City Village gets approved. Now, there's one thing that everybody who sits on this commission knows, that a big chunk of North Camino Ramon is slated for destination retail. And we've had more meetings than I can count where we were told that's a dead issue. So what's going to happen is large portions of North Camino Ramon specific plan are going to be changed in terms of residential housing. It's going to be more dense. And we're not going to have, I don't think, any problem meeting the 1144. I think we're going to wind up going over 2,000 for this area, and losing some units at BR6 really doesn't bother me that much. I understand we're giving up some space and some unit count, but I think in the grand scheme of things, this is probably the right thing to do. And when we go through the housing element, we're going to find where we're going to stick the rest of the units, and it's going to be appropriate. I understand Commissioner Edwards' concerns about density, lack thereof. I agree with that. I share that sentiment. I feel the same way about some of the other housing projects we looked at, but I think that I'm satisfied that this particular project fills a need, and I think is going to go towards redeveloping the rest of the planned area, which is eventually something we all want to encourage.
Other commissioners' thoughts on the density topic? Okay, I will weigh in on this one then. I actually agree with Commissioner Edwards on this, as I spent a fair amount of time poring over these. I agree that it is troubling to me, given our new RENA numbers and just housing in the core, which is where we've committed to doing this, that if you take the 6 units per acre on a 30 unit or 30 acre site, it's 180 units that we're going without. And that doesn't include the 2 acre park that has 0 housing on it as part of this parcel. So I likewise am a little concerned in giving up some of the density on this particular project, and to change and in doing so by amending the numbers. So I appreciate the new information we got today. But I do want to say that this is also troubling to me, that if we're looking at the sentiment in the city and amongst the community wide, that this is where they want density to happen, that giving up those the difference between 14 to 20 over the number of acres on this parcel adds up to a lot. So I just wanted to, that was my feeling on that topic of density on this the specific plan changes. Other topics as we continue on? Have we exhausted everyone's concerns on the plan? No? Yep.
If I could, through the chair.
More hands. Okay, good.
One other comment. just to address the comment made by Commissioner Marks earlier related to the roof and dimensional roofing material. I think he had pointed to packet page 38. And packet page 38 is referring to, I think the bullet point related to the roofing material is the original bullet that the applicant had suggested. That additional language has been incorporated on packet page 37. It's the last bullet in the right-hand column. The third column does include that language regarding the dimensional roofing material because as we mentioned, 21A is being deleted. So there will be no 21A, but 20 replaces 21A, and it does have that language. So I just wanted to make that note.
You're right, Cindy. I apologize. I didn't pick that up.
Well, if I can ask Cindy, I think change number 20 refers to the medium mixed density residential, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first question is, are you proposing to make any changes to the description of multifamily medium density, which is pages 715, 716 of the North Community Remote Specific Plan?
The proposed new text edits that are shown starting on packet page 35 are just related to the mixed density residential.
Okay, so are there any changes proposed to multifamily medium density?
So the note on the top of that page 35 says, for ease of readability, staff would recommend keeping the multifamily medium density section as currently written, and then adding a new mixed density residential. So there are no proposed changes to multifamily medium density.
Okay, that's what I thought after going back. And here's the issue that I see. What Commissioner Marks has requested and you have put into change number 20 with respect to mixed density residential. I'm going to read the roofing section so we all go crazy. Roofs may be either flat or sloped, constructed with dimensional roofing material with variations in height and silhouette against the sky. Now, what Commissioner Marks suggested, and correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Marks, was adding the the dimensional material description on change 21A. Now, the problem I see is that as currently written, at least my version of North Community Ramon, that the language that Commissioner Marks wanted for dimensional roofing material does not appear in the description of multifamily medium density.
That's correct. So if you wanted to change page 7-15 under the multifamily medium density to have the language for the roofing material to match the mixed density residential language, we could add that as an additional edit to the matrix.
Okay, first of all, it actually appears on 7-16 at the bottom. The section starts on 715, but the specific language is on 7-16. And second of all, before I did that, I want Commissioner Marks' approval to do that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to do is all the roofs in the development should be dimensional materials. To put it very simplistically, on a large building or on a small building, roof design is, I think, more important than a lot of people give it credit for in terms of giving overall character to the architecture. And so what I'm trying to do is all the roofs that we may be constructing should be dimensional materials.
Then I would suggest that that same language be added to the multifamily high-density design guidelines on the bottom of page 7-18 of the current North Camino Ramon specific plan to make all the discussions of roof dimensional materials consistent.
It sounds like there is an agreement on that. It's going to exercise some chair authority here. All right. Ms. Cunningham, you have patiently waited.
Thank you. I just wanted to address some of the questions that were raised on density and clarify. I just want to make sure I wasn't on mute and clarify that our overall density is actually 18.5 over the site. So it ranges from about 16.5 to 23 overall. City Walk has much higher density, different type of product, and this for sale community, has a diversity of housing types appropriate for an infill project. And also market driven, and it really complements the density that you have with City Walk with the stacked flats and diversity of housing, which again is consistent with the specific plan. And there's a lot to balance on the site with the park and the walking district and open space. So we feel that this density range is really appropriate for the site. And then if I could, the dimensional roofing, I just wanted to clarify that in some instances, there was a desire on the towns to have more of a flat roof look, and you have to allow areas for solar arrays, solar panels. So I hope that the intent isn't to make that so strict that there's no room, to actually achieve all of the goals that you need to with the different products and the roof materials.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Cindy, you still have your hand up. Do it. No. Okay. And Denise, we've met your question requirement. Yes. Just want to.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. All right. Other commissioners, other topics on the specific plan amendments? Chair Wallace, or Commissioner Wallace, I'm giving your old title back.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I don't mind. Okay.
You were so good.
All right. Unless someone else has something more to say, I would like to make a motion. I would make a motion to approve resolution number 06-21, resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Ramon recommending City Council approval of an amendment to the North Camino Ramon Specific Plan, SPA 21-800-001, and an addendum to the North Camino Ramon Specific Plan Environmental Impact Report. And I'm just going to use one number, paren IS 21-250-001, as amended tonight.
Chair Kuznick, I'll second the motion, but with the first and a second, I did want to make one, it was a question really. I had sent a couple of really minor typographical corrections to Cindy. Cindy, do I need to actually say them out loud, or what did I send? You take a look and see if they're valid or not. I'm sorry, Ms. G.
Sure, I did take a look at those. Yeah, there are just some minor edits to the figure numbers that accidentally some numbers were transposed, but the figure, no changes to the figure itself. No.
Correct.
We have those.
Okay, so no content changes. There were just a couple, as Ms. G said, there's just a couple of references to tables or things that numbers were not quite right. But okay, thank you. I still did second, the motion.
Yes. So, Mr. Wallace,
Yes, ma'am.
your hand was up. I just wanted.
Oh, I'm slow on my mouse.
Okay, are we ready for a roll call vote? We had
The first and second, are you ready to call the question?
I'm sorry, could you?
We have a first and a second. Are you ready to call the question of the commission?
I have more comments, but I was sort of slightly preempted on the motion, but I just want to make sure we all have our opportunity to
I'd like to
have our
hear your
piece here.
comments. I'd like to hear your comments.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would withdraw my motion so you can make your comments, Chair, and then I can always remove the motion.
Well, through the chair, you have a motion and a second, but you can always continue comments. The motion does not have to be rescinded.
Okay.
The motion still stands, but you can still comment on the motion.
Okay, I would like to continue the comment on the motion then. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, I just have to, I cannot let this moment pass without saying that I have some concerns about how this has come to us. Please don't misunderstand my comments about the process in regards to your project. But I think that one of the things that I have found troubling from the very beginning of this process is that we were handed a done deal, that we were given a list of 24 amendments to this North Camino Ramon project that we've had to slog through for your project. It looks as if you perhaps looked at the North Camino Ramon project and said, that's not a problem. And then set about to get us to amend all the things that you needed. And again, I don't want you to construe this as a challenge to the quality of your project, whether it's suitable for San Ramon, but it is really concerning for me as a commissioner that we are setting the case in which future projects will come before this commission and before the city and basically just start piecemealing all the things that they want for just their amendment. I still am not really quite satisfied with how this meets the goals of the walking district. I think you have sidewalks that go nowhere other than around your property, and I don't think it gives the feel for what we were looking for a very pedestrian-centered community. It's going to be an island housing with stuff not close by, and it still borders two incredibly busy streets in which we were likely put young people, possibly with young families. And I have spoken repeatedly on my concerns about that. So I just wanted to make sure that that there were some concerns I had about how this has transpired. And I know staff, you have been just magnificent in working through the issues that we raised. But having spent the last two meetings poring over the North Camino Ramon specific plan, it seemed like it was a good plan to start with, and I looked at that parcel G and thought like, oh, there was a 2-acre park already there. There were streets already planned. And pretty much that just, that did not seem to have sway. Okay, we'll temper my language. So I just wanted so I have some concerns with this and how this is going to move planning in our city going forward. So I think, it's coming here with 24 amendments. Now, granted, some were small, like changing maps and things like that, but this was kind of a big ask. for an area that had already spent quite a lot of time developing a specific plan. And to my understanding, that's what specific plans are for. So thank you to my fellow commissioners for letting me, as chairperson, have a final say. And unless someone would like to say more, I believe we might be ready to vote. Not seeing anyone look panicked. All right. To our recording secretary, I believe you have a motion and a second.
All right, thank you. I'll do a roll call vote. We had mover Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
Seconder Vice Chair Alpert.
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards.
Aye.
Commissioner Marks.
Aye.
And Chair Kuznick.
Reluctantly, I am an aye.
Thank you.
That would be yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Part of the agenda is
Madam Chair, before
Yes,
we leave,
sir.
before we leave this, I voted aye because I want to move the walking district along. And I believe that if we're going to approve the project, the actual 404 unit project, these changes are probably what you need to do. But I want to say that it in no way indicates where I am on the actual project. I am looking forward to the applicant making some changes that we have talked about, in part because we have been frustrated that we didn't have a chance to talk about these early on, and in part because I think it would better the project. And so I just want to say that I hope nobody reads anything into my vote regarding what I will do when the actual project comes before us.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks. All right. We are at second item on this agenda, which is to continue the Planning Commission public hearing on the development application to October 19th. Does that require a motion? Or are we just going to carry it forward?
Didn't we make a motion at our last meeting to continue the hearing on the application to the 19th?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yes, we
I think
did.
We needed to make it again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate my fellow commissioners here. All right. It's 8:28. It's still early. No, before we start the next one, would the commission like to take their 5-minute break? Or plow on? Oh, okay, we're plowing on. Thank you. No, it's not plowing. Okay, sorry. Moving on to item 10.1. The Wildflower Fields Townhomes. And we have a presentation from Mr. Tsukamoto.
Good evening, commissioners and public. I'd like to share a screen. Of the PowerPoint presentation. This project before you is the townhome development on a 3.57 acre lot surrounded by commercial developments on 3 sides. And here's the site plan showing the property characteristics. The pink line here indicates how the slope of this property is going down from west to east, from high point to low point. And then this line here again, west to east, and high point to low point. And those 4 things indicates the cross section of the homes or townhome structures proposed. And then this is a project site plan indicating the driveway coming through 4 buildings and go up here and come down and out. That's the basic layout. And in the middle of this development is a common space with landscaping and the gathering space with the water control pond or basin here. And then this side is a sloped area as unbuildable land, as they claim it. And this is the subdivision map that they proposed. And this yellow part is the public right-of-way dedication for 0.2 acres to be subtracted from the property, 3.57 acres. And this is the internal driveway that has the non-exclusive easement serving those 4 properties. And then this is a sloped area as a undeveloped because there's a fault line runs through this portion of the property. And the applicant early on wanted to subtract this portion of the lot as the unusable land, but that cannot be done under the general plan policy. And also this proposal has a few spots of unmet standards, such as the setback of a 25-foot minimum setback are not met at this corner here, this corner there, and this corner here. And this thin line on the northern end indicates the unmet landscaping area. That's supposed to be 4 feet or so, but proposed landscaping area appears to be 2 feet or even less. And this portion indicates the retaining wall being taller than 4 feet. So that needs to be addressed with density concession and the waivers. And this is the proposed affordable unit distribution map in the original packet, but this has been replaced with this site plan, which is included in the project description. Now they're proposing 16 accessory dwelling units as affordable unit. And also this is the layout of the accessory dwelling unit. And this is the architectural design reviewed by the Architecture Review Board in showing the characteristics of the proposed architectural design with gables are the main feature, and ARB appreciated this design. And this is again the site landscape plan showing a variety of trees in a common space, some orchard, and then vegetable garden or something to that extent, community amenity included in the area and landscape plan. So this is the characteristics of the proposed project. And then tonight, staff suggests the commission discuss the affordable unit and the density, the use of ADU as an proposed affordable units, because this has to be well understood and well evaluated. And once we can pass this phase, then we can see, consider the density bonus and then concession. So I'd like to emphasize that this project is vested on the Crow Canyon specific plan. And this plan requires 25% of the total unit being affordable. And then proposed project includes ADUs as the affordable units. And each ADU is 260 square feet. And in the past, the city has allowed to use the ADUs to satisfy the affordability. But the use of ADUs in multifamily development is not been done. And this is the first time, especially in the Crow Canyon specific plan area. And also staff identified some inconsistency with the general plan policy. The housing policy requires that units be essentially indistinguishable from surrounding market rate units. And the ADU and then other townhome units appear to be quite different in size as well. So even though they're proposing those ADUs, and then also the total floor area of ADUs appears to be less than 5% of the total livable space. And where the CCSP, Crow Canyon specific plan, requires for 25%. And so it appears there's some kind of discrepancy or unmet ADU compliance here. But that is something that needs to be discussed. And also there appears to be another way to be in compliance as paying the fee altogether, the balance of the 25% to be paid by fee, and it could that be satisfied as the affordable compliance. So that's the question the staff has. And with that, I'd like to recommend the commission receive staff report, and also applicant has a presentation tonight. And then they have more details on the architectural design as well. And then consider the project, but staff recommends continuing the public hearing for the further discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. So the applicant.
Thank you, Shinye. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Mike Sullivan, and I'm the project manager representing the applicant this evening. I'd like to first take the opportunity to thank staff as well as the Architectural Review Board, as we've worked extensively together, and we've appreciated their collaboration throughout the process. We've had the opportunity to respond to comments and in many cases continue to improve the project, and we're very excited to share the development with you tonight. Due to the importance of producing more affordable housing in our community, I'd like to first touch on the work we've done with staff to significantly improve the affordable housing component. By utilizing accessory dwelling units here, we've created a total of 63 housing units with this community rather than the original 47 townhomes that were proposed. This results in 16 units that are affordable but by design, but they're also deed restricted to serve more very low and low income residents that we otherwise would not be able to serve. The proposal produces affordable units that are comprising more than 34% of the entire community, which is far exceeding the Crow Canyon specific target plan of 25%. We have dispersed those units throughout the entire community, and we are, as staff report correctly points out, we are predicting that rents would be in that $700 to $900 per month rent range. So we're very excited to have this unique opportunity to help add additional housing units that are available to the community at that income level. I would like to introduce the team. We have a brief presentation that Jonathan from KTGY will go over through tonight. And in the event we do have specific questions for consultants, we have our civil engineer, landscape architect, as well as Brian Wetner available from Miller Starr and Steve Riley from Land Advisors. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the architect, Jonathan, who will provide a brief overview of the community, as well as some of the most recent plan updates that we made following our Architectural Review Board meeting. And then we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thanks, Mike. My name is Jonathan Boryak. I'm a principal with KTGY in Oakland, California, and excited to be in front of the commission again tonight. I'm not sure on my screen, just to double check, Shanae, it's kind of showing it as like a notes view. Is everyone else sort of seeing presentation view? Just want to make sure you guys are getting the most clear image there. So let me try this one there. Where'd you go? Share screen.
Does it look better? What do you see? There you go. Perfect. Yep. Thank you, sir. You're welcome. So you can go to the next slide, please. Is the one? No. Let's see.
Try your arrow key.
I'm sorry. Just a second. Just to fill the void here, what I'll briefly talk through is kind of high level the concept that directed how we laid out the site, some of the constraints we were working with, goals related to our interaction between landscape architecture and the building architecture, concepts for the elevations, and then a couple revisions made as a result of our ARB meeting recently to improve upon the project. And then with that, we'll kind of toss it back over for questions and comments. And we're, again, the whole team, not just myself, but CBG Civil and landscape architect Eric from Gates and Associates are also here for questions as we get to it. What do you see now? We're back to the notes version, but that's fine. We can go this way. Yep. There you go. So for the site plan orientation, it's really about working the buildings and the landscape with the topography of the site, right? I know Shanae showed the section across the site, and we've got a sloping topography coming downhill from left to right across the screen. And so really trying to orient those buildings so that they're not fighting that topography. And then really being mindful of the constraints regarding access in and out of the site for fire trucks, trash, and likewise. So you kind of are forced to do this loop street of sorts and orient these townhomes around it. Again, trying to hit what was essentially a minimum density goal on the site as well. So that was really directing and dictating the kind of product type and homes that we would put on here, townhomes, as opposed to say single family detached or something like that, right? We've got density goals to meet here. And then often what we were kind of fighting against and really working with Gates and Associates on here was how to take this central sloping area that's kind of needed to make up the topography across the site and really turn that into the focal point that these homes surround themselves around, but that it doesn't feel like you're just using retaining walls and bioretention and stairways to kind of climb up this grade. I think we've seen some sites like that, and I can even think of some kind of older sites like that in San Ramon, but really trying to ramp up and create this central landscape access that is active and engaged and has usability and different functional points along it. So Shanae, if you go to the next slide, please. This is a blow up of that landscape, what we're calling the community deck area. And you've got ramped areas that move left to right and then traverse back along this. Really, instead of focusing it around a stairway, you're creating this bigger path and pedestrian experience, and then breaking off of that and changing materials to go into these community decks that have seating areas, lighting above them, kind of play landscape features. There's some boulders and rocks in the mix. So as you go to the next slide, Shanae, when we started to think of architecture, it's how do we support and engage that? And we created an architecture of gables that not only define the individual units, but really are trying to like frame that space and frame onto it. And then using a play of color to create contrast and change in materials from the lap siding. So working with some traditional forms here, but trying to go towards where we see the marketplace, which is a more contemporary, elegant, simple application of some of those traditional forms and styles and materials. At the ARB hearing, we got some feedback
related to how the edges of these buildings specifically engage Hooper Drive. That's the gray area that Sinead is circling there. So they had the great comment of continuing some of that warmer lap siding around those areas and bringing that up. And it sort of brings some more warmth to that elevation as they engage Hooper. And we've actually incorporated that on all the buildings because we thought it was a good comment as well there. And then additionally, and you can go to the next slide. Additionally, there were some comments related to making sure we've got columnar landscaping along the garage sides. You know, in our original artistic representation, it was kind of low ground shrubs. And they said, we'd really love to see something with some more verticality brought into that mix. We've also continued those gable forms around the backside on these alleyways. You know, again, focusing, as we know, San Ramon, focusing on four-sided architecture. And because you experience this project, both from the fronts and the backs, you know, feeling it is important to bring those elements around all sides. So those were really the driving concepts for what we have in front of you all tonight. Obviously, we can delve into materials and details and applications and get into any of those topics, both related to the site, landscape, or architecture as the commission has any questions. So again, we're happy to be here, and I'll turn it back over to Mike. And then Mike, if you don't have anything, maybe we can toss it back to everyone else.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, absolutely. Welcome any questions you might have.
Questions for the applicant? Or we clarifying questions for staff or applicant at this time? Okay, Commissioner Edwards.
I have a question for Ms. Poon. I'd like to understand the situation here with the accessory dwelling units. I am looking at the government code section that was referenced in the materials that we have in the staff report. It's government code section 65852.2 M. And that states a local agency may count an accessory dwelling unit for purposes of identifying adequate sites for housing as specified in subdivision A of section 65583.1, subject to authorization by the department and compliance with this division. My question is, number one, is this permissive and not mandatory? Secondly, if we were to accept these accessory dwelling units to satisfy the below market rate housing requirements, do we need to obtain authorization from the Housing and Community Development Department?
Okay. So first question is, yes, ADUs will count as units. And the state has made that very clear. And it is, I mean, this is the first time we've had this, but I don't believe that we have to clear from the HCD, I think the acceptance of ADUs. I think that's up to the locality, whether that that we, you know, that would comply with our policies as far as affordable housing and state law. Did I answer?
So I suppose I just want to clarify whether this language is permissive or mandatory.
It's permissive that they may count as affordable units.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have some questions about the ADUs. There is a comment on plan sheet A1.0.0 that says ADU parking, no additional parking stalls have been added. I'm trying to clarify, for the 16 units, are there parking stalls provided for those units?
Through the chair, I believe that the parkings for ADUs are not provided.
They are not provided. And so that means that of the 10 parking stalls that are delineated as guest parking, isn't it likely that people who live on the project site in the 16 units are going to park in the guest parking stalls? They may not meet the requirements of what the HOA might require, but practically speaking, where are they going to park? They're going to have to park either in the guest parking stalls or on Hooper Drive. And we typically do not allow on-street parking to meet parking requirements. So I guess my question to either staff or the applicant is, how are you intending to meet that?
Commissioner Marks, yeah, great question. Our intent here with the ADU units is that we would have the association manage and regulate the parking so that if you do have residents that are living in the accessory dwelling units, they would be able to have parking passes that would allow them to park in guest parking. So yes, we would be able to provide some of that parking on site. The other for us, it's also the idea that, a lot of these residents might use alternative means of transportation, whether it's public transportation or, bicycling, and it's providing that kind of transportation to a wider range of folks, making parking not the regulation that is keeping us from providing affordable housing. Of course, the easy answer is we could provide fewer units, but we'd be losing the affordable units as a result of doing so, and at the expense. So it is a little bit of a balance, and I think that we were trying to achieve that balance here with 16 units. With the original plan, we had 7. This was something that it's I think a great approach to providing more inclusionary housing in this community. And when we started talking about it with staff, we were encouraged to look for opportunities to provide more of these units. And you're 100% correct. That provides a little bit more pressure on parking, but for us, the opportunity to provide this number of inclusionary units was quite attractive for us.
Okay, so again, there's a question to be answered at a later date as to whether you are meeting the requirements of the city's code relative to both guest parking and unit parking, but that's perhaps for a later date. Here's a question about affordability. Or let me just start off with the use of the unit. How do you preserve it as a long-term affordable unit rather than a mother-in-law unit, so to speak, or a room for an older child who is just back from college and looking for a job but doesn't have another place to live, or as an office? I mean, is it going to be deed restricted and monitored? And if it's monitored, who does the monitoring about who's in the unit?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely deed restricted. There's no provision that will force a homeowner to rent their unit. So to your earlier point, if somebody said, they've got a multi-generational situation, they want to take care of, let's just say their aging mother, they wanted to be able to use that unit for that purpose, they would be able to do that. And that was something, when we discussed it with staff, we felt was actually quite desirable, because that person would otherwise be renting an apartment in another community and still impacting overall housing supply. So the way we looked at it is, because we've designed these 80 units to be standalone residents, it would ultimately be providing more supply to the housing stock and providing more opportunities for families, whether they're looking for additional revenue, and they want to rent them out, which I do think will be attractive for the vast majority of these units, but it would also provide them with, some solutions, whether it's, their child coming back from college and living there for a few months, 6 months, whatever it may be, or going back to renting it out full time.
How does that meet the deed restriction?
So the deed restriction that the deed restriction as we envision it being drafted would require that it would be rented at the affordable levels for that particular unit, whether it's very low, low, moderate. And that would be done in the event they do lease that unit. It would be deed restricted for that rental. And if I could just ask briefly here, I've got Steve Riley and Brian Wetner are looking to join us here. And it sounds like maybe on Brian, he's in the lobby there, Shinya. And I'm wondering if you would be able to bring him in.
I actually tried to bring both of them in multiple times. I don't know if maybe they missed the promotion, but I will try to bring them in again for you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, it would be either Steve Riley or Brian Wetner. They're I know they're together, so either one of those computers, if they get access, that'll take care of it.
Wonderful.
Well, until Jen brings them in, here's another question. And this is really a building code question. As I recall in the building code, habitable areas, habitable space had to have 2 ins and outs, multiple ingress and egress points for fire safety and other reasons. You have 1, and I'm wondering, and it's been a while since I've had to work with the California Building Code. Has it changed so that you can have 1 ingress and egress?
Yes, yeah, it's been 1 point of ingress egress for a good amount of time now. Used to be when you went to 3 stories, they wanted a second egress from the 3rd story if you were more than 500 square feet, but they changed that about 10, 15 years ago.
I don't think it was quite then, but in any event, I guess going back to the affordability thing, yes, one of the concerns I have is, yes, this might meet our RENA numbers, but in terms of providing long-term assured affordability for low and very low income persons, a situation where if you rent it out, it has to be within a certain income range doesn't assure that it will, for all of that time, be affordable. And that is something of a concern for me. The final concern I would have relative to affordability is, are you going to limit the occupancy to 1 person, or could a couple come in?
Yeah, we definitely see it as an opportunity to allow couples. 2 people, I think, is an absolutely fair occupancy given the product type that we're offering here with the affordable units. Jonathan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I don't think we envisioned an occupancy limit. There's not a building code occupancy limit. So in terms of livability of these units, what we've seen in the past is it is appealing to both individuals and couples who fall within that income range there. And it is, right, it's a good opportunity for them to live within an existing or a new market rate neighborhood and development, right? And it's building units, and it's putting them, so often studio size units like this are only built and encompassed within fully affordable projects by affordable developers.
The part of the reason I ask that is, again, going back to the parking situation, it is common that when you have a couple that does not have children, you have 2 working individuals, which likely means 2 cars, or at least in some cases will mean 2 cars. And again, on site, you're not providing parking at all. And so it just seems that the 10 guest parking stalls won't be guest parking stalls very long. They will be used at least substantially by perhaps a couple who have 2 cars. In any event, those are my questions at this point. I have other comments and questions, but I think that's enough for me right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Albert, Commissioner Wallace, other questions?
I do have some questions, probably for staff more than.
Okay.
So, Shinye, I think in the presentation you said elsewhere in the city we've used ADUs to meet the affordable requirement. Did I hear that correctly? ADUs, is that right?
Yes, yes.
And then can you explain the difference between what is an ADU and what is being proposed here?
In terms of the terminology, there's no difference between accessory dwelling units that I've used in the presentation versus what they're proposing. Proposed 260 unit is an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, and then maybe you can help me understand, what does junior accessory dwelling unit?
Junior accessory dwelling unit has connection from the accessory unit to a primary unit, direct connection. So internal connection is necessary. And in this case, there is no internal connection. Therefore, this is an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay. Is there, okay, I think I follow you. And then I think I heard and I understand there's a difference between these units being counted towards as a housing unit, and then there's a secondary question. There's no question on whether these count as a housing unit. Under state law, they are housing units. Is that correct? Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. And the open is, how do they become BMR housing units? And could you re-explain what makes this housing unit a BMR housing unit?
That is based on the mean income in San Ramon, and then there's a proportional.
Maybe I didn't ask the question
level.
right. What makes this housing unit a BMR housing unit rather than just an ADU or a junior ADU?
Sorry, through the chair, it would be the deed restriction that's placed on it that limits the occupancy type to an affordable unit.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. And then maybe to clarify what Commissioner Marks was asking, the deed restriction stays with the property, is that correct? And whether the owner sells and then moves on, they know they're selling a unit that includes a 55 or whatever the number of years remaining, or reset as an affordable unit. Is that how the deed restriction works?
Correct.
Okay. And then in the general plan, you mentioned the housing policy 11.1.I.12 as, you know, all the units have to be distributed residential throughout the project, and affordable units are essentially indistinguishable from surrounding market rate units. Are general plan policies optional to follow, or can we choose to ignore them if we don't like them or if we want to? How do we address this is an implementation general plan policy. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on what are the guidelines. Are they optional to follow, or can we just choose to ignore them if we want to?
I think I can respond to that in some capacity. So oftentimes there are competing general plan goals and objectives. And so typically with any development project, you're not necessarily going to meet all the requirements associated with general plan policy. And again, there's certain ones that are more applicable than others in terms of the type of project that you're looking at. And so there's some subtleties to the project and applicability questions that would come into play. And so that's something that again would be addressed through the findings process in a resolution and through that analysis. I did want to make one clarification on the junior ADU aspect. One of the benefits of a junior ADU with the connection to the house is that they're allowed to share sanitary facilities. And in the case of this proposal, they have standalone sanitary facilities. So it meets the definition of an ADU in terms of the facilities that are being provided. And then one other thing to mention with regard to state law and parking, there are exceptions to parking requirements given the proximity to bus routes and bus stops. And so there's limitations on the ability to require additional parking for ADUs.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
To add to the bus stop comment, there is a bus stop at the San Ramon Valley Boulevard and Cooper Drive intersection that is within probably like a quarter mile away from the project site.
Okay. Going back to the general plan housing policy, it has a italics right underneath it that says this policy will be implemented through guidelines published by the Housing Advisory Committee. Are those guidelines available or have they been published? I'm not sure I'm asking.
This would be a staff answer, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not getting an answer, but so I guess that's a question to be answered, how that policy was to be implemented at some point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess part of the argument is that we have adopted inclusionary housing standards as one way of implementing our housing policies related to this. So in a sense, and that has been approved by the Housing Advisory Committee. So there are ordinances and implementation tools that serve as the means for implementation. Whether there's an additional set of guidelines, I would need to do a little more research on that.
Okay, so I'm expecting, perhaps at some place, and maybe it's just a question, have we ever defined what essentially indistinguishable means, either through these guidelines or other policies or anything else that we should be cognizant of?
I'm unaware of an actual definition of that. It's plain language would be the interpretation.
Okay. I think that's it for my questions for now. Thank you.
Mr. Wallace.
I do not have any questions.
Okay. I have thank you. I have a couple of questions. Just kind of off the wall. Do you have any read on how far this development is from the nearest park, which I believe would be up at Faria Parkway? What's the distance from this proposal up to that park?
That is a great question. I know I've got a couple people on the team who are looking that up right now, and I will do so as well.
Okay, I know it's up the hill, but it is the closest park, and since yours doesn't, it only has that little strip there. So the question is, and when I was looking at your diagrams, I know we use the term ADU. Is there a difference between that, calling it an ADU, versus just what I used to know as a studio apartment?
Yeah, great question. Essentially, what you have there is living a lot like a studio apartment. Okay. We're calling it an accessory dwelling unit because it is its own standalone unit, and we've chosen to call it an ADU. That is the definition as well that the state uses to accept that unit and count that toward RENA. So yeah, I think thinking of it as a studio unit is a pretty good way of looking at it.
Okay, thank you. I get the subtlety of the name issue. So will the ADU have a separate address?
It will. Yeah,
okay.
It will. So we'd work with staff on determining whether it's adding an A or an B to that. But yes, that would definitely have its own separate mailing address.
Okay, so I applaud your effort to add more to from the first draft to the current draft. But I'm going to ask kind of the other 10-cent question is, well, why not put an ADU in each of these then?
Yeah, that's a great question. And
because they all have the first floor.
Right. So some of the plans don't have enough space on the first floor to allow for an ADU. So practically speaking, if we wanted to do it, we wouldn't have the real estate on the ground floor unit and the 2-car garage. So we would have a limitation there. Could we add more units? Yes, we probably could go and add more units. one of the reasons we're asking for some of the concessions here, the waivers on the retaining walls and setbacks, and in most cases, they're just a foot there. In some cases, it's even less, is because of the fact that when we did add more ADU units throughout the community, the footprint did grow a little bit for each one of these buildings. And as a result, adding more units would make the footprint of all these townhome buildings a little bit larger. So I think, where we landed is probably maxing out the affordable units throughout the development and hopefully finding, a very solid balance between the market rate and the affordable. And on that end, I would just say I did confirm we're a quarter of a mile from the bus stop there. So that's part of, in terms of alleviating the parking concern, that would be, I think, helpful for those residents.
Okay, thank you. What you said that the other units, there would not be enough room for an ADU. Is there a minimum for those size requirement on the ADUs?
There's not so much a minimum square footage as to make it work. It increases depth that we don't necessarily have throughout the site. So it's a deeper unit, and in some cases a little bit of a wider unit just to fit that program in there.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And then question on proximity to park. You're exactly a mile up to the new park on Faria Preserve Parkway, and then you're 1.2 miles to the staging area at Los Trompas, open space.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, other questions, commissioners? Okay. Thank you so much for clarifying this. So I think at this point, we will take the opportunity to open for public comment. And so we have our discussion about public commenting.
Yes, sure. So before we do that, I just wanted to mention we did receive one late communication item, and that was from Brian Winter of Miller Star Regalia. And it was on behalf of the applicant Windflower Fields LLC. And they provided information on multiple state housing laws, which were passed to help promote construction of new housing. And this communication item was provided to the commission prior to tonight's meeting. And that was the only item that we received prior to the meeting. And as a reminder for anyone who would like to speak on item 10.1, now would be your time. You could click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone. And I do see one speaker. So let me go ahead and we can pull this person in. It looks like we have Jim Blickenstaff. Hi again, Jim.
Hello again, commissioners. I have just a brief comment at this time because there'll be other public hearings, but it's mainly on aesthetics. Where this is located, it's going to have a visual impact on a key street, I believe, San Ramon Valley Boulevard. And so you're going to have visual impacts from these buildings and the frontage of these buildings. And so it's going to be key to mitigate that. And you've already taken steps in this concept to do that with landscaping. But what you also have to do is make the architecture compatible with the surrounding area. And behind this, there's some green space that can turn brown or tan, depending on the time of year. And so you're going to want natural tones to not make it stand out in an unnatural way. Right now, I understand the color palette for these structures is basically variations of gray and white and maybe a little blue. And that's sort of, those are kind of harsh colors. And when you have the frontage like you have, from a distance, it looks smooth, plaster, whatever, it has a smooth look and it has a massing look wherever that surface is, especially with the color that contrasts with the green space that is near this area. So I think to blend it in, ideally, landscape is key. That's the first level of mitigation for visual impacts is the landscaping with the treescape that can reduce that impact of the walls and the buildings. But beyond that, you're going to need varying textures and then varying colors that are compatible with the surrounding areas and complement the natural view that you have with the hills up further up from there. So I just say, let's also pay attention to how this is going to look from the roads that go by it, as well as other issues that come up with ADUs and other things that are also important. But right now, I think I just wanted to get on the record that aesthetics is still somewhat of an open question, how this can be improved to blend with the area. And I'd like to see more creativity in that regard, just to have it fit in as natural as possible for where it's located. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. All right. It looks like that is our last comment. So through the chair, if you'd like, we can go ahead and close out public comment.
I think we should do that. So we will close public comment on this topic. Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, this is our time to weigh in on what we think of this. In addition to our discussion amongst ourselves, who would like to go first? Commissioner Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair Kuznick. I appreciate that we've got a SB 330 project in front of us, so I'm going to limit my comments to issues that I view as objective issues. I am not in support, and I do not agree that this project is putting forward sufficient affordable units. I do not agree that these units are intended as separate units. And in fact, the project plans actually label these units as a third or fourth bedroom as a part of the larger townhome. And for that reason, I do not think we have a properly qualified project here that can be appropriately claiming to be providing this level of affordability. And I do share staff's concern about the percentage of the project that is being considered to be affordable as opposed to the remainder of the project. And so for that, I'm going to leave my comments there for now.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Wallace.
I agree with Commissioner Edwards' bottom line that the junior ADUs do not qualify as affordable housing under the San Ramon guidelines. Approach a slightly different way. The applicant defines the project as a 47-unit townhome neighborhood with for sale townhomes. So the description by the applicant is that a unit consists of a townhome. That's floor to ceiling space. The ADUs they are proposing are not a townhome. Moreover, they are not for sale. So they don't meet the description of the unit in the townhome neighborhood that's defined in the application. Our housing policy in the Crow Canyon specific plan, which does apply to this development, says that 15% of units in the development shall be set aside for affordable housing. That means that 7 of the townhomes, which are the units in this development, must be set aside for affordable housing. That's the must-built portion of the requirement of our specific plan. Commissioner Alpert pointed out in his questioning, our general plan requires that affordable units be indistinguishable from the market rate units. And the reason that exists is so that the affordable units that are in a large project don't have crap put in them instead of the market rate units, that when you walk down the street, you can't tell a market rate unit from a below market rate unit. But I don't know that we need to get to the general plan description, because it is clear to me that the description of this project that's been submitted to us does not meet the requirements for affordable housing in the specific plan. Now, I did look over council's letter that was given to us in the middle of the afternoon, and I didn't have time to thoroughly research the issue, but I have not found any case law or secondary authorities that would require us to treat a 250 square foot bedroom as the equivalent of a 2,000 square foot townhome for purposes of our affordable housing policy. Some of us have not always agreed as to whether units must be built to meet our affordable housing requirements. In this particular instance, I think these things should be built. I will also say that I am chagrined, to say the least, about the size of the development. Or maybe there are some specific physical requirements that would limit the development to 47 dwelling units. But I recall that about 3 years ago, we had a proposal for this specific property that had some 200 apartment units programmed for it. And I would suspect that somewhere between 200 and 47, there is a number that could meet our density goals, as well as to provide true affordable housing for people in San Ramon. Commissioner Marks pointed out that the junior ADUs do not have parking associated with them. I agree with his comments, at least as I perceive his comments. That's what's going to happen, is that people who have, if they live in the junior ADUs, they're not going to have a place to park on campus. They're going to be parking on the adjacent streets. And I suspect all of us have driven up and down that street enough to know what parking would try and look like on that street. Lastly, Commissioner Marks brought up the issue of, are they going to be rented out? The deed restriction will at most say that if you rent this unit out, you cannot charge more than either very low income or low income needs for that unit. They do not require you to rent the unit out at all. So I think it's farcical to think that we're actually going to get 16 people living in those 16 units. But that's an issue we really don't have to deal with, because my current opinion, and I am open to being convinced otherwise, is that the junior ADUs proposed for this project do not qualify as affordable housing under the Crow Canyon specific plan. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
Commissioner Albert, go ahead.
So I don't have a lot more to add over what Commissioners Edwards and Wallace said, but I'd just like to reinforce that if we are to rely on objective standards in the Crow Canyon specific plan, it is very clear that it's units that count, not bedrooms, or not bedrooms that masquerade as small units. So for that reason, I believe that these units do not qualify as affordable. And I do also believe the general plan policy does matter. And similar to Eric Wallace's comment, Commissioner Wallace's comment, there's a purpose for that. And, you know, my interpretation of what that means is if you walk down the hallway and you look at a bunch of doors, you don't know what somebody's paying for rent or what they're paid for that unit. And there's a good reason for that. And I think that is the way the city has implemented many projects throughout the state or throughout the city for affordable below market rate units. Is we've had a very strict policy, and it's been successfully implemented for years, that units are indistinguishable from one another. And for those two reasons primarily, I don't feel these qualify as affordable units as being requested.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Marks, you ready to go? Got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'm simply going to say that I agree with the three commissioners who have spoken already. And the only thing I would add is sometimes then the issue becomes, are you ready to fee out? the obligation, and I am not. Feeing out is short-term money and it's one-time money and it tends to get absolved, or I should say absorbed. And I further don't really know where the fees go. I've never seen an accounting of where we spent the money or how many families were helped or anything like that. I think we should go for the units. They should be long-term affordable. It should be monitored by a proper deed restriction and whatever other requirements we have. And the long and the short of it is, I am not supportive of this project, either for affordability reasons, parking reasons, or the general plan policy reason.
Thank you. And to round out the comments, I think it's interesting that we have recently seen a couple different iterations on the townhomes, and some seem to not meet the density, but we've also recently approved a plan that was able to figure out how to squeeze townhomes, in very interesting configurations and really got the density up. I would like to, I would encourage you to think about, instead of basically a basement or a first floor bedroom or ADU, is to be creative and maybe we can skinny down the other units. I always think that we not everybody needs as big a housing unit as we all have come to believe we need. Maybe we could skinny some of them down and put in a one-car garage and a proper housing unit, in these buildings. If we skinny them down, make one of the units in each of the building a one-car garage, then perhaps we would also meet the setback limitations as well. But I'm just a commissioner. You guys are the creative architects, and so we are going to see if we can help you be more creative and come back with places that we really believe, people who need affordable housing will want to live in, beyond just basically a studio apartment in somebody else's home or attached to someone else's home. So I think those are the comments we share. We seem to have a shared concerns on these ADUs and so forth, and parking. I agree with you on that, Commissioner Marks, the parking. I noted that in my concerns when I was studying this. Commissioner Marks, go ahead.
I apologize. There was one other point that I wanted to make, and that is I disagree a little bit with what Commissioner Wallace was saying relative to referencing back to a former project. I know that this project is not subject to the adopted San Ramon Village Plan, but nonetheless, during that discussion, we really did not see this as a high-density housing site, in part because of the scale of what you would create. Given how high up on the rise this site is, to put a higher density project up there is to put something up there that is way out of scale. So to some extent, the townhouses are not a bad idea. It's the other issues around it that seem to make it less viable, in my opinion. But I think the commission should be aware of what we may be recommending in terms of the scale of what might be built there.
Thank you. Important point for all of us. Yes. All right. So in our agenda, we have provided comments to the applicant and staff. And is there a motion to continue this to our next meeting?
Through the chair.
Yes.
Could we continue this to November 2nd rather than the meeting that's coming up on the 19th?
I would be fine with me. Anybody else? Is there any reason why this would be a point of contention? All right. So you're suggesting we continue it into November
2nd.
November 2nd. Thank you so much. Does that require a motion or can we just agree to it?
Motion. and the
All
vote.
right,
And
ladies and gentlemen.
if there a motion and if there's direction to staff for what we should be discussing with the applicant, we've heard the discussion tonight, but anything specific that you could provide to us, that would be beneficial also.
I would have to say that the commission has some very serious concerns on how these ADUs may or may not meet both affordability, our affordable requirement, and just ancillary issues with parking and so forth. And the real question, I think, is this how we want to help this applicant meet their inclusionary housing requirements and still help them meet their density goals, our density goals. Is that
Great.
helpful?
Yes, it is. Just wanted to restate it for the staff and for the applicant. Thank you.
Does that summarize it for everybody? You can nod. Okay. Thank you. All right. So then this will then continue on to November 2nd. Yes.
I think we need to make a motion.
Oh, that's right.
So I'll do that.
Thank you.
I would make a motion to continue the hearing on the application in question for Windflower Fields Townhomes to November 2nd.
I'll second
I
that.
can second that. Yeah,
I think Commissioner Edwards beat you to the gate.
perfect. As long as it's done.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right. Thank you. I'll do a roll call vote real quick. We have Commissioner Wallace was our mover.
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards was our seconder.
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
Vice Chair Alpert,
Aye.
and Chair Kuznick.
Aye.
Thank you. So item
Thank you.
10.1 will be continued to November 2nd.
Thank you so much.
All
And
right.
thank you, applicants and staff. All right, we are moving on to item number 11, non-public hearing action items. There are none. Item 12, study session commissioner liaison reports. And so, do we have some liaison reports? Commissioner Wallace.
I do. I attended a 4 o'clock Friday meeting of the Housing Advisory Committee. And the purpose of that meeting was to discuss guidelines for the Affordable Housing Fund. And staff presented to HAC a brief update of the current status of the Affordable Housing Fund, where monies are being used, what's left in it, and what is perceived to be coming into the fund over the next 4 years, specifically from FOREA. I believe that report was provided to the City Council Policy Committee on Monday, and Commissioner Alpert might correct me on that, but I think that he indicated it was. And I would like to see that report or a revision thereof to be presented to us at our next meeting for this reason. We have discussed accepting or potentially accepting in lieu fees for a portion of the City Village project with the idea that it would supplement our Affordable Housing Fund. Based on conversations I've had with staff, I would request staff provide not only a report on the housing fund as it currently exists, what's projected to come in over the next couple of years, but I would like their recommendations and thoughts as to the potential uses of that fund, and specifically for the monies that we had talked to Summerhill about taking in lieu of building some of the affordable homes. I would say that it was my idea, although Commissioner Alpert was interested in it as well, to fee out some of the affordable housing at City Village. And based on my conversations with staff recently, I think that that may not be the best idea, but I really would like to hear from staff on that for our next meeting. So for that particular issue, we can put it to bed once and for all.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Other liaison No? Okay. Thank you so much. All right, we move on to Lauren. Do you have
Thank you.
updates for us?
Yes, so October 19th, we have a joint workshop with City Council on the general plan. That will be a 5 o'clock start time. And then we have our regular meeting at 7 p.m. start time for the City Village development applications, as you're aware. And then for November 2nd, currently we have the continuation of Windflower proposal from tonight.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, one and all. Anything else for the good of the order here? Seeing none, we will adjourn this meeting at 9:36. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.